Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edge of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals, and then we'll spend a chunk of the show opening and holding a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of meditative sound bath, a soundscape of gentleness, quietude, reflection, and maybe mourning. There is a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century, so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Chinese Swamp Cypress. The Chinese Swamp Cypress is a critically endangered conifer native to Southeast Asia, specifically South and Southeastern China and Laos and Southern Vietnam. The Chinese Swamp Cypress is a deciduous conifer that reaches 65 to 100 feet in height, with a trunk diameter averaging 2 feet to 4 feet. Though a recently discovered stand of trees in Laos has individuals whose trunks range from 6 to 11 feet in diameter and are reaching heights over 150 feet. It generally grows in a pyramidal or cone shape, kind of like a classic Christmas tree, with spreading lower branches and upward pointed but drooping branches at the top, which give the tree a kind of like softened silhouette. The bark is thick, grayish brown, and as it ages, the bark presents vertical fissures, which reveal a rich red color from the cambium. The cambium is the cellular layer right beneath the bark. These are actively growing cells that differentiate into new bark or new sapwood. And so really quick, here's a quick simplified cross-section of a tree trunk. So first there's the outer bark, which I think we all can imagine, which we all know and love, which is the tree's protective layer. It keeps out excess moisture during heavy rain and holds in moisture during dry spells. It insulates the tree against cold and heat and protects against insects. The second layer is the inner bark, which moves nutrients through the tree. And then the cambium, which, as mentioned, is like the growing layer. As it grows, it responds to hormones to either become new bark, going like outward, or new sapwood, going inward. And so then, next, that sapwood is the tree's pipeline for moving water from the tree's roots up to the branches and leaves. And so then as cambium cells become like the new outer rings of the sapwood, the inner rings of the sapwood become heartwood. And so that's the last layer, is the heartwood. This is the sturdy central core of the tree. These cells are technically dead, but they do not decay and remain stable and strong as long as the outer layers of the trunk are intact. So with the Chinese swamp cypress, as the tree ages, its bark layers split or fissure in these rough vertical lines, and so we can see that red cambium layer beneath. The root system of the Chinese swamp cypress grows pneumatophores. These are commonly called cypress knees, which are these woody structures that grow upward, so vertically from the roots, extending above the ground in kind of various shapes, ranging from these like knotty small knobs to tall, pretty pointed projections. Scientists are uncertain of the specific role that these pneumatophore growths play, though there are three kind of leading proposed hypotheses. One is that these cypress knees, these pneumatophores, facilitate the exchange of gases, primarily oxygen, between the tree's roots and the atmosphere. Two, the knees may act as like a kind of anchor, providing additional support for the tree in soft, swampy soil. Or three, that these cypress knees help trap and accumulate sediment around the base of the tree, so protecting the roots from erosion and creating a more nutrient-rich environment. In the Chinese swamp cypress, these knees can extend as far as 20 feet from the base of the trunk. The branchlet system of the Chinese swamp cypress is dimorphic. Okay, so two terms to define from that sentence. The first, branchlet. So picture a tree, its trunk, and then the branches that sprout from that trunk, and then the twigs, stems, and little bits that like sprout from the branches themselves. Those are called branchlets. And so then the other term, dimorphic, just means taking two forms. So the branchlet system of the Chinese swamp cypress is dimorphic. A single branch will have some branchlets that grow long, slender needle-like leaves, and other branchlets, again on the same branch, that grow smaller, wider, overlapping these scale-like leaves. The Chinese swamp cypress is deciduous, meaning it sheds its leaves annually. This is fairly unusual for conifers, and is particularly specialized in the Chinese swamp cypress based on this branchlet dimorphism. The needle-like leaves will transform into this like really beautiful, deep reddish-brown color in the autumn and then shed in the winter, while the smaller scale-like branchlets will persist throughout the year. The tree has annual branchlets and perennial branchlets. The Chinese swamp cypress is monoecious, meaning it has both male and female reproductive organs flowering on the same individual. Its flowers are inconspicuous. Inconspicuous is a botanical term for flowers that do not have showy bright colors or strong fragrances, so they're like not adapted to attract pollinators like birds or insects. The Chinese swamp cypress is wind pollinated. So male cones hang downward in tassel-like clusters and produce large amounts of light and powdery pollen easily carried by the wind. Then the female cones, they bud in a 1-inch pear shape. They have sticky scales that capture the pollen grains as they blow by. Once fertilized, female cones develop into seeds, gradually maturing, expanding, and hardening into these woody structures. Unlike many other conifers, the mature cones of the Chinese Swamp Cypress disintegrate, and so they break apart to release the ripened seeds. And these winged seeds are again carried by the wind to new soil, where they have the potential to germinate, root, sprout, and grow into new saplings. In the dream, I am myself. Sadly. I want to dream mysteriously, as other, expansively, and yet, in this dream, I am me. Hairless, thin-skinned mammal, more than halfway through projected lifespan, unlikely to reproduce. But joyfully, in this dream, I somehow have a slower sense of time. I am without impatience, without the phantom vibrate of my phone. I can watch the long windings of the wind and the pollen on it, and the coneflower fertilized, the green growing brown, woodening, and the months are passing easy now and without regret. And then the slow disintegration of cone to reveal fluttering seeds. Another journey on the wind. Many scattered to the stream, many snack for spotted wren, many fall on stone. Yet one into a soft, soaked silt embrace. It's a kind of hopefulness, I think. The kind worth waiting for. In the dream. The Chinese swamp cypress is native to the subtropical and tropical regions of South and Southeastern China and Laos and Vietnam. These are moist lowland and swamp biomes characterized by warm temperatures, high humidity, and abundant rainfall. The tree grows in and along the banks of slow-moving rivers, in flood deltas, and in swampland. These are wetlands interspersed with patches of drier land with terrain that's generally flat or only gently sloping. The water table is close to the surface. Soils are nutrient-rich, composed of loose clay and silt deposits and organic matter accumulated over time. Well adapted to these waterlogged conditions, Chinese swamp cypress have been observed thriving in waters even up to 2 feet deep. The climate of this region is characterized by hot, humid summers, with temperatures reaching the 90s, and mild winters with temperatures rarely falling below 45 degrees. Annual rainfall is high, averaging roughly 70 inches per year, with the majority falling during the monsoon season from May to mid-October. The Chinese swamp cypress is a keystone species in this wetland environment, providing essential habitat and resources for a variety of life. Its foliage offers shelter and nesting sites for birds, while the submerged roots provide refuge for fish and other aquatic creatures. The pneumatophores, the cypress knees, which they rise above the ground in the waterline, create these tiny microhabitats for organisms like algae and invertebrate. And then its trunk, knees, and extensive root system help stabilize the soil, preventing erosion. And its annual needle fall contributes to nutrient cycling in the ecosystem. It shares its habitat with Japanese cedar, white-winged duck, hydrangea, short-tailed scimitar babbler, giant muntjac, spotted wren babbler, Chinese tupelo, red pine, fig, wild boar, Annamite striped rabbit, box-leafed holly, Japanese winterberry, the recently described bovine mammal Saola, cinnamon fern, red-collared woodpecker, water gum, magnolia, crested argus, and of course many, many more. We have fossil record of the Chinese swamp cypresses genus dating from the Cretaceous period. This is like roughly 100 million years ago, meaning dinosaurs grazed on its branches. And it survived the KPG extinction event. That's the asteroid impact and resultant climate upheaval 66 million years ago, which wiped out 3/4 of Earth's plant and animal species, including all non-avian dinosaurs. The cypress survived that. It's estimated that the oldest currently living wild specimen is over 650 years old. Historically, the Chinese swamp cypress has suffered severe population decline due to overharvesting. The tree's water-resistant, decay-resistant scented wood has been extensively logged for building houses, furniture, boats, and today, even though it's protected, it is still being illegally poached and is highly sought after on luxury timber black markets. Human encroachment, both historically and currently, have profoundly diminished the tree's native habitat. So these are things like agricultural expansion, urbanization, and infrastructure projects. And of course, the resultant pollution from those constructions contaminates surface and groundwater, which affects the tree's growth and overall health. Human-induced climate change also poses a growing risk. Increasing temperatures and specifically changes in rainfall patterns are disrupting the wetland ecosystems the cypress thrives in. The entire population of Chinese swamp cypress in Laos is within the protective Natai Nam Tien National Park. The trees in Vietnam are protected in the Iro and Chap Kuso nature reserves, and there appear to be no remaining wild Chinese swamp cypress in China. Chinese swamp cypress was added to the IUCN Red List of critically endangered species in 2010, and its population is currently in decline. It's estimated that less than 400 Chinese swamp cypress remain in the wild. This information for today's show about the Chinese swamp cypress was compiled from the International Dendrology Society's Trees and Shrubs online database, the Gymnosperm database at conifers.org, the scientific journal Plant Diversity, volume 41, number 4, Arnoldia, volume 78, issue 3. This is the journal from Harvard's Arnold Arboretum, from the U.S. Forest Service, from the IUCN, and from Wikipedia. So in a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share this earth. But briefly, I want to specify that this music is not for the Chinese swamp cypress. I don't think of the swamp cypress as a vessel to extract meaning from or to force meaning upon. So instead, I intend this music to express my very human sense of awe, and to be a moment to consider my own relationship to other life, and in particular, life that nears extinction. And so I will hold space in sound, awe, contemplation, and reflection. And I warmly invite you to join me. honor the life force of the Chinese Swamp Cypress. I will endeavor to hold its name, a seed of awe and remembrance, gently on my lips. I am grateful to have shared time on our small bright planet with this amazing being. And I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so in the name of the Chinese Swamp Cypress, I pledge to reduce my consumption and my carbon footprint and curb my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of any plant or animal kin or their habitat by corporations and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Dad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.